Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my fellow brothers and sisters out on the interwebs. I hope you guys are doing absolutely phenomenal, inshallah. This is your brother Yasin coming at you guys with another podcast episode related to the Deen Ilm Chronicles. I know that I have been a little bit MIA, inshallah, still working on figuring out a good system on managing the publishing schedule because Brother Sohail and I are doing a weekly podcast episode that is about an hour long on our YouTube channel as well as on all major publishing platforms. And so there is a level of ilm that we're talking about there as well. However, in today's episode, I want to talk about what is the relationship between insan and forgetfulness. And this was something that my teacher spoke to us about in passing as a remark as we were in bewilderment of the miracle that is the Arabic language. And of course, if you are listening to this, obviously you're somebody who has an interest in the Islamic sciences. And so for you, I'm sure that you are also in awe and inspired by the miracles that is in the Quran, right? And so in today's episode, I really want to touch base on the word insan. And as of late, I've really been thinking, I've been really pondering on the in the ayat in Surah Al-A'la where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى بل تؤثي قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا. That قد أفلح من تزكى, whoever makes tazkiyah of himself, he will be successful. And then وذكر اسم ربه فصلى, and if he remembers his Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he should make fasalla, he should make salah. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا, and yet you are still بل تؤثرون. بل means and yet, it means like or and, it's a negation. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا, that you still prefer, that you still have preference for حياة الدنيا. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى, that the akhirah is so much better than what is al-abqa, what is the thing that is preceding it, that is before it. And yet, subhanAllah, when I read these ayat and it comes to my mind how much we forget about the akhirah and how much we get engulfed in the affairs of the dunya. And I wonder to myself, I sometimes think, I sit down and I say, why is that the case? I feel like I've been in strife of my nafs and I'm always fighting with myself to just always remember. Right, that's why we know that the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reason why it's so yanfa', it's so beneficial for the mu'min, is because there's this constant state of forgetfulness. And so subhanAllah, as I was thinking about that tonight, I was praying Maghrib and I was reading Surah Al-A'la, and I said, why is that the case? And then this tidbit of ilm that my teacher talked to me about so many years ago came to my mind, is that the word insan, right? Many of us know it from an Urdu perspective, it's from an Arabic perspective. Many will say that it means man, right? Or mankind, right? And nas means mankind. However, the true origins of the word insan, many scholars have spoken about this, and there's a very strong opinion that the origin of the word insan actually comes from the word nasiya, which means to forget. And so therein there lies the secret of the issue that man inherently has within himself, is that by our very nature, in the very word that we use to describe ourselves as insan, the very fault that we have is literally within the origins of how we describe ourselves, which is that we are forgetful. And so it is an asl sifa, it is the core fundamental characteristic for us as human beings that we forget. And so this is also another point that I spoke to a friend of mine, to a brother of mine recently, in which he said that, Yasin, I feel as though that I have these fluctuations in my ahwal, in my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in my connection with al-akhirah, in my connection to the al-haq, yawm al-haq, right? In Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya, ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمُ الْحَقِّ, that is the day of haq. And yet we forget it. Why is that the case? And of course we can reference the hadith of the Sahaba, and طبعا the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in which Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and another Sahabi, they were speaking amongst each other that they also had these differing states of ahwal. That they were saying to each other, we feel as though we are munafiqeen because when we are with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we feel as though we are connected to al-akhirah. We feel as though there's a bird on our heads and that we are in this high peak state of iman. And then when we leave the halaqat, right, when we leave the companionship of him sallallahu alaihi wasallam and we go out and do our worldly affairs, we play with our children, we spend time with our family, we feel a fluctuation in our ahwal. And so inherently, if somebody doesn't understand that, somebody may feel as though that is a problem. Somebody may feel as though there is a deficiency in who we are. But the truth is that by our very nature as insan, unless you're trying to evolve, right? Like if you're somebody who is one of my younger audiences, right? You might say, I'm going to evolve like a Pokemon or something like that, right? You're somebody who's going to evolve into some other state. You're going to all of a sudden not become an insan anymore. But unless you're trying to do that and you're going to become a malak, or you're going to become an angel, or you're going to become a jinn or something like that, which obviously we know is not possible, then you have to come to terms with a part of the human experience is this state of forgetfulness. Is this constant strife and being in this state of you remember sometimes and you forget other times. And this is exactly precisely the reason why all of the affairs and all of the a'mal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and all the tools that we have within Islam on the personal level, because a lot of people misunderstand that all of Islam did not only come for the personal level. Islam is a complete way of life, and that includes not only how to deal with things on the constitutional nation level, but it also includes how to deal with people in the society, in the community, in the family, in the marriage, and then finally on the personal level, right? Your affair with yourself and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the truth is that all of Islam on the personal level, whether that be the salawat that we have, whether that be the dua that we have, whether that be the adhkar that we have, right? Whenever you are going to the car, there's a dua. Whenever you are about to eat, there's a dua. Whenever you're about to put on clothes, whenever you're about to use the restroom, before you pray your salah, there are so many adhkar. And at first it can seem very overwhelming. However, if you change your perspective and you realize that the reason why all of these adhkar and the reason why we have all of these things in place, right? And obviously if you don't read them, it's not haram, right? Many people have taken this now to mean, oh, if I don't do tasbih, wal'adhu billah, after salah, then they look bad and look down at the person. No, salah was the fard, and if somebody had to go to work or they had to go to their affairs, there's no issues with that. And that is another whole separate podcast episode that we can make regarding some of the misunderstandings that many Muslims have, right? That we have their fara'id, and anything above that is additional. We should not make the additional all of a sudden the fara'id, because then you're taking Islam into your own hands and you're deciding what is halal and what is haram. And we already know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran that whoever does so, he will not have la yuflih, he will not be successful. And so the reason why we have all of these adhkar and the reason why it's so ingrained on the personal level is because of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as our creator already knows that we are insan and we are forgetful. And so as a result, He subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all of these means in order to remember Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to actually remember what is al-haq, to remember that this life is temporary, to be able to remember that we are just passengers in this life. And even though we might take it so seriously, even though we might think that it means everything to us, the truth is that as soon as you say Allahu Akbar, as soon as you remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than whatever it is on your mind that is preoccupying you, then all of a sudden you remember the truth of life. And so I just wanted to share that with you, because as I'm sitting here after Maghrib and I'm remembering this, that insan, from the very core, from the very word that we use to describe ourselves, insan, we are insan. The very origin of the word comes from nasiya, which means to forget. And so it is a part of the human condition that we will forever be in this state of forgetfulness. But verily the best of us are those who remember. And verily the best of us are those who can remember the truth and what is the reality of this life, so that way we don't get engulfed with this dunya. And of course, there's a whole another podcast episode that I can make, because then some people want to take what it is that I'm saying in this podcast episode and misconstrue it, and then go into zuhud and say, oh, I'm just going to remember akhirah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. No. There's always a balance here, and that's a whole another podcast episode, another discussion. However, in today's episode, that's what I'm really just emphasizing and highlighting, is the idea of nasiya is a core fundamental principle within the idea of being insan. I hope you guys found value in this, inshallah. Looking forward to catching you guys on the next one. This is your brother Yasin checking out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.